So, how am I going to do this then? Hi there Star Wars collectors, and welcome to another Bossk's Bounty video, and welcome to episode 42 of Ask Bossk's Bounty. This is of course the weekly series where you guys get to ask me questions in the comment section below, and every week I do my very best to answer them. I do want to take this time now to welcome any new subscribers that I do have this week. Welcome to an amazing community. I put out a video earlier this week of the vintage collection Smuggler's Run Millennium Falcon, and I think I'm probably the first person on YouTube to do that video, and it has gained me quite a few new subscribers, so welcome everybody. If you happen to like this video, don't forget to drop a like down below, and of course if you are new to the channel and you haven't yet subscribed, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And of course don't forget to leave your questions in the comment section below for next week's episode. And with all that being said, let's get straight on to the first question of the week. Clone Commando Gonk says, loving the Trandoshan hands. Thank you very much. Question for next week. What Imperial era trooper would you like to see in the vintage collection that we have never seen on a vintage card? So that one's a really easy one for me. It is this guy here, the AT-AT driver. I have the vintage one here and I have the Saga collection one here. I would want a whole brand new sculpt for this figure because this one isn't quite there. He doesn't have ball jointed elbows. He has the swivel hips and things like that. So essentially I think we do need a new AT-AT driver, and that's probably the reason why we still haven't seen that on a vintage style card, but that is definitely the one that I would pick on an Empire Strikes Back card. One of my favourite characters. He would have to be the one I choose. Another one that I can think of would be from the Solo movie. I think it's the Patrol Trooper. He's an awesome looking trooper, isn't he? He's a kind of mix between a Scout Trooper and a Stormtrooper essentially. Lots of black and white on him. He looks really cool, and I think he'd look great on a vintage style card as well. Now I do apologise, I don't think I'm going to be able to say this person's name from their account, and they say, thanks for the great video Bossk's Bounty. I love the variety, passion and knowledge you share with us collectors, so thank you very much. My question for next week is, do you have or own any signed carded figures in your collection? If not, would you like to add? I'm lucky to have 100 plus in my collection and would love to add anything signed by Hamill or Ford. So signing figures isn't something that I have ever done. I probably wouldn't ever do that on a vintage Star Wars figure. I'm not sure if I'd do that. I do know a lot of people that get their vintage collection figures, like modern figures, signed. And I remember being at Echo Base last year, the Echo Base Live convention, and somebody had a Alan Harris signed Power of the Force 2 Bossk for sale, which I didn't pick up. I always felt that if I did want to get that signature, I wanted to meet Alan in person and get something signed myself. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to do that now because sadly he did pass away, which is very sad indeed. I do have a couple of comics which have been signed. So I have the John Tyler Christopher action figure variant covers, and at one of those conventions I did get Mike Edmonds signed, which he played Logray the Ewok, so that's pretty cool. But in terms of figure cards, that's just not something I've ever done really. And I can see that you said that you want to add Hamill or Ford. Well, that's going to be pretty difficult. I mean Harrison Ford, he very rarely signs anything, I'm pretty sure. But good luck in your pursuit all the same. Josh G says, hello Bossk, glad things are going a bit better. Thank you very much. My question would be, do you think that Hasbro will continue the trend and keep doing these greatest hits re-release waves for people who missed out the first time? If so, what figures do you think would be included? I can pretty much say it'll be a guarantee that they continue to do those. It's a way for them to get new collectors on board, back into the line or whatever. I know it doesn't go down too well with certain collectors, which ultimately may have spent quite a lot of money on their collection, or they may have bought a figure on the secondary market. So if we take, for example, the upcoming wave with the 2 Clone Wars figures of Obi-Wan and Anakin, those on the secondary market historically have gone for a lot of money, and people that were trying to complete their collection may have forked out a lot of money for one of those. So it can be a bit of annoying for people, but I do understand why Hasbro are doing it. They're trying to get other people back in the line, and my opinion on it is that so long as it doesn't affect the amount of waves of new figures that are created each year, then ultimately I'm not too bothered what they do with that. This time around when they released them, I had a lot of them already, so I didn't really need to pick them up. But ultimately, yes, I do think they will continue to do it. In terms of which characters I think they'll pick, I really do not know, because they don't really look at the secondary market and decide which ones are really expensive and just make those ones. It's not how it's done. This year they concentrated on the Empire Strikes Back figures and Clone Wars figures in those two waves. Wicket was a bit of a weird one. I'm not really sure why he's been released again. You never know, it could be something to do with a playset they have planned or something like that. Crispy Greedo says, your camera is always so steady. What is it that you rest your phone on? Also, do you think it's possible for us to get a newly sculpted Rancor? Do you think the Jabba's set Rancor was accurate enough in sculpt and scale? To answer your first question, I literally use a mini little tripod thing, which has got a special adapter for your phone so you can place it in there. I'll leave a link in the description below to a Amazon listing or something where you can take a look at the sort of thing that I use. In terms of the Rancor, as you can see, I do have the vintage Kenner Rancor here, which is absolutely awesome. I can't really comment too much on the Jabba's set one that came with the Gamorrean Guard. I can't comment on the scale and accuracy of that because I don't own it, unfortunately. But from the pictures that I've seen, I'll whack one up on the screen now. It looks pretty good. Not really too sure about the scale. It's pretty big. I think it's much bigger than this one that I have here. I definitely would like to see a new Rancor in a vintage style box as part of the vintage collection. A bit like they've done with the Torn or whatever. That would be brilliant. You know, that vintage style box with a new Rancor in it, you know, with decent paint. I think that would be awesome. Owen Brown says, as per, another great episode, Tim. Glad to hear you're a football fan. Being from Edinburgh, I followed Hibernian all of my life. Unrelated Star Wars question for next week. What's your favourite movie apart from Star Wars? Oh man, there's lots of... I do like watching films. I would say probably Goodfellas, The Godfather 1 and 2, Wild Geese, I love. Raiders of the Lost Ark, Jaws, just some classic movies, you know. Apocalypse Now would be another one, if I was to pick one out. There's loads of films that I love. Black Hawk Down. I love military films, like war films, I must admit. They don't necessarily have to be too accurate. I do like watching a good war film. Collector 1970 says, what figure did you have the most trouble finding? Believe it or not, mine was the grey version of the Legacy Ugnaught. Well, I tell you what, the figure that I'm having the most problem with right at this moment is the Black Series Carbonite Han Solo, which is just... I ordered it from Amazon. I ordered 2 of them. One so I could open it, one so I could keep it carded for my 40th anniversary collection. And what happened? One arrived, not 2, and it was all bent out of shape and the bubble was knackered. So I actually sent it back and they promised they'd send me a replacement. And then in the end, they cancelled my order because they're out of stock. So now I'm in limbo. I don't actually have that carded figure and they're already too much for that I want to pay on eBay. Scalpers are obviously selling them on eBay. So yeah, that's one that I'm having trouble getting hold of. But maybe a historic figure, you mean? This is definitely one that I had trouble getting, which is the Herchek Cal Fass from the Cantina. This guy is really expensive on the secondary market, and I ended up getting him on a Facebook group in the end, not so long ago actually, so I was really pleased to eventually get hold of him because he was one of the ones that I had trouble getting hold of. And I really do wish that I wasn't taking a break from collecting when I was buying a house and that sort of thing when the Legacy collection was around, because there's some really, really good figures in this line. So it's a bit of a shame, really. As per usual, just a bit of a break from the questions, just to let you know, obviously, if you haven't watched it already, I did post the Millennium Falcon video, and these are the 2 figures that came with it. The Hondo figure is coming out single carded. He was announced on the Fan First Friday, single carded, which is pretty good for people that don't want to buy the Falcon. But if you haven't watched that video, please do check it out. It's half an hour long, so maybe just whack it on and go off and have a cup of tea or something and leave it running. Really does help the channel. Thanks very much. Aaron Katama says, question for next week. Tim, slightly off topic, but do you collect or have any interest in collecting the Kenner Indiana Jones line from back in the day? Thanks for the great content. P.S. Best wishes to Mrs. Bossk. Thank you very much, Aaron. I do appreciate that. So yeah, absolutely. I do have interest in the Kenner Indiana Jones line. I love anything Kenner really, or Palatoy. I think that might stem from loving Star Wars figures so much, but I do like the look of the original Indiana Jones figures. They're very cool. The card backs are cool. Similar to the Mask line, I love those figures as well. They came out a little bit late for me. When I was growing up, I was kind of moving away from toys, but I know some like younger friends of mine at the time were well into those figures, and looking at those now on eBay and stuff, they look great. Where you get the little 2-pack of figures and things like that. And similarly with Palatoy, you know, I used to have a really good collection of carded Action Force figures and vehicles, which unfortunately I sold, and I just love those card backs. But yeah, anything Kenner and Palatoy really I'm I'm more than happy to look into buying, but I'm really into Star Wars, and that's kind of where all my sort of money goes, really. Jason Turk says, praying for Mrs. Bossk. Star Wars will be there to take care of your family. Thank you, guys. I do appreciate all the kind words that I've had. My wife is actually on the mend now, which is a huge relief. So thank you. Question: have you had a vintage collection figure you thought about selling because the value got ridiculous? Never considered selling, but I have the Ahsoka vintage collection carded and see it selling for $250, $350. That could buy a lot of Bossk. Kind of hard to turn down, and how high could they go? So yeah, I've never really considered selling any of my vintage collection because I ultimately want the whole collection of them, if that's at all possible. There's some I'm missing which I'm not really too concerned about, but if I was going to sort of get close to having them all, then I would probably want to finish that collection, as it were. But yeah, it's difficult, isn't it? When I look at this guy here, for example, I mean, don't get me wrong, it's a cool figure, it's a cool card back, but if I was to choose my favourite vintage collection figures, this isn't up there for me. It's an expanded universe figure, which isn't really a focus of mine. I haven't been that massively into the expanded universe. You know, I've played some of the games and read some of the books and stuff, but ultimately my focus is on the original trilogy, really, and the prequel trilogy, and of course I'll get these sequel trilogy figures as well. But you know, if somebody said to me, oh, I'll give you $200 for this, then my mind would definitely be ticking about, what could I get with that money? I could probably even get a vintage Star Wars figure, a decent vintage Star Wars figure for that money. But ultimately, I think I will keep hold of it because, as I said, you know, I would prefer to try and complete the collection, perhaps. But yeah, you're right. They're going for silly money at the moment, aren't they? Alex Valdez says, good evening from LA. Thanks for all the great videos. Do you think playsets will become a new trend with Star Wars, as many characters and vehicles have been remade throughout the years? So yes, on the Fans First Friday, they have announced another playset, which I thought looked absolutely brilliant. The Tantive 4. Okay, it might just be a corridor. It may not be a playset. It's got 2 sliding doors, which I guess you could say have a play feature. But ultimately, that is the kind of thing that I want from the vintage collection going forward. I kind of like those playsets. Set your figures up in a cool diorama. And I think they've got the design of it nailed. It looks really, really good. So I don't think they'll stop there. I think over the next year or so, you could probably see more playsets being made. Aboka says, hey Bossk, a little nail polish might help your hand look nicer. Great episode. Question for next week. If you were to have one AT-AT from all the different series versions, which would be your pick and why? Thanks. So immediately I would have to say I would want the vintage Kenner AT-AT. It's something that I never actually had as a kid. One Christmas I was given the Rebel Transport, where my next door neighbour was given the AT-AT, and although I loved my present, I always looked over at envy at his AT-AT, and it's just something that I never owned as a kid, and I still don't own one now. So that is something I'm definitely on the lookout for, is a vintage AT-AT boxed. But if you're talking about modern, then I'd want the one that has taken inspiration from that vintage one, and that is the Vintage Collection Empire Strikes Back one, the Hoth version. So not really too interested in the Return of the Jedi one with the dirty feet, but I would love that Empire Strikes Back Vintage Collection boxed vehicle, the AT-AT. It looks great. You know, maybe they'll do something again in the future where they update it and bring it out again in the Vintage Collection. Who knows? But again, it's another one that goes for quite a lot of money on the secondary market, so I won't be getting it anytime soon. Alright then guys, that's it for this week's video. Thank you very much for tuning in, and thank you very much for your questions. Remember to leave a question for next week's episode in the comment section below, and we can carry on this awesome series. So thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you on the next one.